look, this time of year, all I'm doing is just listening. Like the time for me thinking is kind of past, and it's just like, all right, like the papers are due, the tests are due. Like, what's everybody's answer? And like, what are they saying? And whether you like this answer or not, and you're listening, I kind of think this is where we're at. I think a lot of people, and I think that trickles down to people who vote, think that if Josh Allen wins the next 3 games, he's going to win Most Valuable Player. And it's just worth keeping in mind that this is the first game. So again, Brock Purdy's price was told you 3 weeks ago, he's the price most likely to drop. Look at the schedule. He's the safest case to make. And huge win Seattle, huge win Arizona. Those were expected by the market. Now what's expected by the market? Like, are there any like auto wins coming up for any of the candidates? Well, Brock Purdy doesn't have one anymore. They're playing Baltimore on Christmas night. That is not a coin flip game. It is still a potential win for the Niners, but this isn't like 13-14 against Arizona. And so if you're like, all right, like, is there someone who can gain momentum? And you already see a bunch of people, like prominent media people, tweeting, if anybody can be ahead right now. If Allen wins all 3, he wins. Okay. This is game number 1. They're 11.5 against the Chargers. They host the Patriots the week after. Host them. What's that number? Great. You're already in the last week of the season. They're playing Miami for the division title. So just like, again, I'm just listening. And a lot of people seem to start to be saying, oh, that's a terrible sentence. A lot of people seem to be saying he wins the 3. You know what that
sentence was? Abominable.
Abominable. That's exactly what the sentence was. A lot of people seem to be making this case. Like, I wish I was on it earlier, but like, just listen. Like, people are saying this already. And like, if you bet Brock Purdy or you think you should win, be mad. I'm just telling you what people are saying. I don't think this. Who cares what I think? I'm just telling you that's what a lot of people seem to be saying. And so I think it makes it like an interesting insight for Thursday is Josh Allen's MVP price, should it just be a 3-leg parlay of them to win the 3 games? And if so, what is the right price for that in that market? Is that really what it is? Which we talked about last week a little, and we'll talk about more on Thursday.
Let's talk MVP. Purdy minus 200. Lamar plus 500. If you'd like to reiterate earlier thoughts, obviously we can do that here as well. Allen is 10-1. Dak is 6. Jalen Hurts is 11, whatever. Christian McCaffrey is 12. Worth noting, Brock Purdy did say after the game he thinks McCaffrey should be MVP. You got a funny tweet. That's what an MVP. That's what an MVP would say. Brock Purdy.
That was good. Got a good response on that one. Yeah. So.
What do you? So it's like, what do you think here? Because I think like some people are under the impression that this is like winner wins MVP next Monday night. Like, is that
or that it's over already?
Or that Purdy's already won. Correct.
Yeah. So I'll again, for the record, bet Dak 40, went to 2, got a ton of equity 2 weeks ago, bet Brock Purdy to win, said he was the safest candidate, said it was the easiest case. So like, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff the next day. Like, this is where if he wins, I told you I didn't want to lose money if he won. It was the safest case to make. Thought his price was really likely to drop. I've been right about all that stuff so far, by the way, whether he wins or not. So like, kind of have some idea what I'm talking about here. Can we just start there for every Purdy fanboy like gets really mad about this? I think it's the most interesting thing about this by far is like, whatever you think, the person listening, about who should win, we all have our opinions about who should win. Most people listening probably think Purdy should win. A lot of people on Twitter certainly think he should win. That's great. None of you vote. And I don't vote either, and Nick doesn't vote. And I'm just saying, it's really interesting that a guy who's, again, like, I'm going to compliment him. He's the best quarterback this year on the best team in the league, and he's number 1 in every single stat that matters, basically. I think it's interesting. You would think someone with that profile, this wouldn't even be a discussion. You would think, like, imagine if Mahomes had those numbers or Josh Allen had those numbers. The minus 10,000, there would be no discussion. We wouldn't even be talking about it today. It'd be over. And yet, despite that, all people who vote, people who write about it, who have votes confirmed, everyone's saying the same thing. Wow, it's really wide open right now. A lot of guys who can win. What? That should set off huge alarm bells for you. Whether you bet Brock Purdy or not, how are we in this? What a remarkable, interesting situation this could potentially be. Imagine someone who's number 1 at everything and the best player on the best team this year, and the discussion is, wow, it's wide open right now. And we'll prove it. We got the receipts after the break. Like, I think this is still really interesting, even if you think it shouldn't be, and I think it should be. the thing to know about the voter, it's not that like this is, and Nick, you could probably add more color to this than anybody, just as having worked in the NFL for so long. Like, explain to people, like, so 50 people vote for awards, by the way. There are 50 voters. Give people an idea of like what the voter is like. Like, what do they do? Who are they? Without like, not names, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think like there's it's a really loaded question because I know a lot of these people
as best as you can answer it without giving away what you don't want to give away, right?
So I would say that if you're out there and you're like, you bet on awards and you like the show and you like the way that like we talk about all this stuff and like then you tail Ken on a lot of these awards thoughts, I think you are making a mistake if you think the people voting think about things the way that we do and the way that you do. It's not what this is. It just isn't what this is. You've got longtime NFL beat writers. You have radio hosts. You have radio executives. You have just sports executives, period, in radio and television that vote on awards here. So this is not like, listen, you have some people like Aaron Schatz, right, who are like, fairly analytically driven. I think
Absolutely.
that is the exception to the rule. I would say that that the majority of MVP voters are more like yell at cloud style analysts, I would say is probably the right term. And candidly, not all of them, and I know most of these people and I like almost all of them, they are like not all of them are actually even NFL analysts.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that was a great answer, by the way. And I don't ask you that to set up like, so Purdy's not going to win. I think he is the most likely winner. I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to win the award. I think to a certain extent it does. They're the best team. He's the quarterback. You don't need to know EPA to know that. Like, it just, if this all holds, I think he's the most likely winner for sure. But again, like, if this was like Mahomes, Josh Allen, whatever, it would be like, it's just done. Like, it's just over. It's already done. And they're going to win the 2 games after this, by the way, too. Almost certainly. They play Washington, I think, in the second to last week of the season. And they play the Rams in the last week. And I guess the thing in that game will be, will the Niners play anybody? Do they need the game? The Rams are going to need the game desperately. That's kind of interesting. It's not for the award, just kind of interesting in terms of like the point spread. Does anybody play? Like, if Purdy's great for 2 weeks, he doesn't have to play in that game to win the award. So I think he's the most likely winner. But again, like, Aaron Schatz is the most of the 50 voters. He's probably the most analytically inclined. He goes on Gil Alexander's show last week on VSiN and says if Josh Allen runs the table, he'd vote for him for MVP. That's the guy who should be like, well, Purdy's number 1 in EPA and Purdy's this. And he even explains, like, in DVOA, and he gave a bunch of other interviews, including to the New York Post, where he basically says, like, look, like Jimmy Garoppolo was like number 1 in DVOA last year. I have to consider the idea that the system is designed to produce really good quarterbacks. It's like a very thoughtful answer to the question. And it's not that again, you could be like, well, that was before this past week's games. Totally fair point. Just like no one was out there saying like Purdy and that's it. And if anybody else had those numbers, that's what we'd be saying. Peter King votes, writes Football Morning in America every morning, has a vote. His exact quote this morning on Most Valuable Player. Again, just like, I think Purdy's going to win. How do you not read? From his column, quote, I think in regards to the MVP, and this is this morning after all the games, I am clueless. Glad I've got 3 weeks to shake out the vote. Lamar is involved now in a big way. Again, like, just listen. Tirico and Collinsworth are doing the game last night. They talk about MVP at the end of the game. Tirico's quote is, I don't know who the best player is between Purdy and McCaffrey. Collinsworth bails out by saying Mahomes is an MVP right now. Again, like, just listen to all this. Doesn't seem like it's just a little shaky. It can't just be, can't just be a little shaky. I get it. Like, you're at home, you pay attention to football. How can it not be Brock Purdy? I'm just telling you, like, it's just an interesting conversation right now. I can't remember a situation like this. It should be done, and yet the people who make the decision are telling you it's not done. And if they're going to say that, then damn it, I have to listen to them. Like, who cares that I think Purdy should win? Who cares that you think Purdy should win? Who cares that anybody thinks it? It's time to start listening, okay? And maybe they beat Baltimore, and it's like everyone's like, you know what? No big deal, Purdy wins. Could totally see that happening. We like San Francisco in the game. Then Purdy probably wins MVP, I guess. Just like, I'm a little more open-minded because the people who actually make the decision are open-minded. And the people who actually make the decision are not certain. And so, like, if they're not certain, I can't be certain. That's all I'm saying. I'm just not certain. And everybody else is like, how could you not be certain? I'm not certain because they're telling me they're not certain.
Well, do you have a thought here on most valuable player and if there's a valuable bet to be made right now in the market here in about a minute?
I think the current pricing is probably about correct, and I think this is a two-horse race now between Purdy and Lamar.
So
Purdy,
not Josh Allen? You don't think Allen could potentially win if they win out?
I don't think there's any scope for Allen. I don't think there's any scope for Allen or Dak after the results this last weekend, and I think realistically, if you want to play some long shot Bills, like I still think they're alive to win the AFC East. I know the Miami Dolphins took care of business convincingly yesterday without Tyreek Hill, but three tough tests for them to land this plane. Purdy, to me, I think is a pretty easy decision. His advanced statistical profile is like top 4 all time among quarterbacks going back to 1999. The idea that the voters aren't going to get behind him, I think, can be pretty easily dispelled when you look at 1999 specifically, where Kurt Warner kind of came out of nowhere, was the clear winner in terms of total EPA on the balance of the season, had the best team, best record. Won 30, got 33 out of 50 votes for the MVP. Like that's kind of where we stand right now. And as you look at Purdy's EPA per play numbers, again, like the only players who have ever over the balance of a season done better than Purdy has done this year were Aaron Rodgers in 2011, Tom Brady in 2007, and Peyton Manning in 2004. The common theme between all 3 of those campaigns, the quarterback named was a near unanimous choice for MVP. I really just don't think that it gets any more complicated than the best team is the Niners. They're the best team by margin right now in virtually everybody's ranking. Even if you don't make numbers, like your power rating is like 1, Niners, big gap, 2, could be any of these teams, right? Like that's kind of the common, prism that everybody's looking at the NFL through right now. And when you have best team, best player, it's pretty straightforward. That quarterback for that team, gets the credit for the wins, gets the credit for what he has done this season, which has been truly, out of this world impressive. Nobody's even talking about the fact that Brock Purdy went under the knife in March, Nick. He got elbow surgery in March. We did not know if he was going to play in week 1. And not only has he played, but he's outperformed every other quarterback in the NFL. It's absolutely amazing to me. It's quite a story to tell. And I think Purdy is the rightful choice, and we'll run away with this award.
10 seconds here for this because I got one more. We don't have a ton of time left, so 10 seconds on this. So you think Purdy's going to win? Even Ken said earlier in the show that probability-wise, Purdy's the most likely to win. He's minus 200. Is there a bet to be made right now on him? Like, is Purdy worth laying minus 200? If the answer is no, that's totally okay. In about 10 seconds here because I got one more for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's not worth laying, in my opinion. Because there is a chance that Lamar beats him head to head. And there is a chance that Lamar backs it up and beats Tua the next week. And at that point, like 2 really high profile wins for a player that everybody already has anchored to MVP candidacy, and Lamar Jackson would be a problem for Purdy. But Purdy needs to regress pretty aggressively statistically to really kind of give up a favorite status. But Lamar, there is scope for him to win still, I think, but it's very small.